Okay, here's the thing. Number 10, the 2012 solar superstorm. We like to think of the sun as a benevolent giver of life. It warms our oceans, feeds our crops, and dictates the rhythm of our days. But in July 2012, our star nearly became our executioner. Most people remember 2012 for the Mayan apocalypse, a pop culture frenzy about the end of the world that never happened. But while humanity was making jokes about ancient calendars, a genuine apocalypse was brewing 93 million miles away. On July 23rd, the sun unleashed a coronal mass ejection, or CME, of terrifying power. This wasn't just a solar flare. It was a shotgun blast of solar plasma and magnetic fields, weighing billions of tons, fired into the void at speeds exceeding 6.7 million miles per hour, sheer ASF. A scientist later confirmed that this was the most powerful solar storm in over 150 years. It rivaled the legendary Carrington event of 1859, which set telegraph wires on fire and created auroras so bright that people could read newspapers at midnight. But the world of 1859 ran on steam and muscle. The world of 2012 ran on silicon, electricity, and fragile satellite networks. If that storm had hit Earth, the results would have been catastrophic beyond comprehension. We aren't just talking about losing GPS or having slow internet. We are talking about the total instant frying of the global power grid. High-voltage transformers, the backbone of modern civilization, would have melted internally, unable to handle the geomagnetically induced currents surging through the ground. The lights would go out, and they wouldn't come back on for years. Imagine a world without refrigeration, no water pumping stations, no fuel pumps working at gas stations, no banking systems, no emergency services. Supply chains would collapse within 72 hours. Cities would turn into starving war zones within a week. A study by the National Academy of Sciences estimated the economic impact would exceed $2 trillion in the first year alone. But the human cost would be incalculable. It would have been a technological reset button, sending us back to the pre-industrial age, but with 7 billion people unable to feed themselves. So why are you hearing this now? Sitting comfortably with electricity? Because of luck. Pure blind luck. The storm tore through Earth's orbit, crossing the exact point in space where our planet had been just 9 days earlier. Think about that. 9 days. In the grand scale of the cosmos, 9 days is a rounding error. It is a fraction of a millisecond. If the eruption had happened just 1 week sooner, human civilization as we know it would have ended in 2012. We didn't survive because of our ingenuity. We didn't survive because of our technology. We survived because the Earth happened to be slightly to the left of the barrel when the gun went off. Number 9. Asteroid 2019. Okay, we trust NASA. We trust that somewhere in a dark room there are geniuses watching screens, tracking every rock that could threaten our existence. We assume that if a city killer was coming, we would know about it months, maybe years in advance. We would have a plan. On July 25th, 2019, that assumption was proven to be a lie. An asteroid, later named 2019, swept past Earth at a distance of just 45,000 miles. To put that in perspective, that is less than 1/5 of the distance to the moon. It was closer to us than some of our weather satellites. This wasn't a pebble. 2019, was estimated to be up to 427 feet wide. That is large enough to level a city the size of New York or London in a heartbeat. If it had struck land, the impact would have released energy equivalent to over 10 megatons of TNT, hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. If it had struck the ocean, it would have generated tsunamis capable of erasing coastlines. But the most terrifying part isn't the size. It's the silence. Nobody saw it coming. The asteroid approached us from the direction of the sun, hiding in the daylight glare. a blind spot that our current telescopes cannot penetrate. It wasn't until the very last moment, mere hours before its closest approach, that separate observatories in Brazil and the United States finally spotted a fast-moving smudge against the stars. By the time the data was processed and the alarm was raised, the rock had already whizzed past us. There was no warning, no sirens, no breaking news banners. The people of Earth went about their morning commute, drank their coffee, and argued about politics, completely unaware that a rock capable of killing millions was skimming the atmosphere. 2019, is a stark reminder of a chilling reality. We are not safe. We are just lucky. Sean, the solar system is a shooting gallery, and occasionally a bullet flies right past our ear before we even hear the gunshot. It proved that despite all our radar and all our confidence, a city-killing monster can sneak up on us in broad daylight, and the first warning we'd get would be the shockwave leveling our homes. Number 8. The Vanilla Observation, 1883. History is often written by the victors, but in the case of cosmic survival, it is written by the survivors. In 1883, humanity survived a shotgun blast from the cosmos, and for over a century, nobody believed the man who saw it happen. On August 12, 1883, a Mexican astronomer named José Bonilla was observing the sun from an observatory in Zacatecas. He was preparing to study the solar corona, but what he saw instead froze his blood. Across the face of the sun, he counted hundreds of dark, fuzzy objects passing in transit. They weren't birds, they weren't insects. They were swarms of unknown bodies crossing between Earth and the sun. So, Bonilla took photographs, some of the earliest astronomical photos ever taken actually, and counted 447 objects over a 2-day period. But when he published his findings, the scientific community in Europe, well, they ridiculed him. They just dismissed his observations as dust on the lens, or maybe high-altitude birds. He was basically laughed out of history, and the vanilla observation became, just a footnote, a curiosity. Fast forward to 2011, researchers from the National Autonomous University of Mexico decided to reanalyze Bonilla's data using modern computing and orbital mechanics. Their findings, honestly, turned that historical curiosity into a source of retrospective horror. They calculated that what Bonilla saw wasn't birds at all. It was actually the fragmented remains of a massive comet, likely weighing over 1 billion tons, that had shattered just weeks or months prior. And here's the terrifying part. The parallax calculations showed these fragments were incredibly close to Earth. They passed within a range of 300 to 5,000 meters from our planet's surface. This is hair-raisingly close. We aren't talking about a near miss in astronomical terms. We are, talking about a razor shave. If that comet stream had intersected Earth, it wouldn't have been a single impact. It would have been a bombardment. Thousands of fragments, ranging from 50 to 800 meters across, would have rained down on the planet over the course of 48 hours. Imagine the Tunguska event of 1908, which flattened 800 square miles of forest, but happening 3,000 times all over the globe simultaneously. It would have been an extinction-level event. The sheer thermal energy released into the atmosphere would have ignited global firestorms, followed by a nuclear winter that would have lasted decades. In 1883, humanity was blissfully unaware. There was no panic, no screaming in the streets, just one astronomer in Mexico, looking through his telescope, watching the funeral procession of the human race pass by, missing us by a cosmic hair's breadth. Number 7. The Great Geomagnetic Storm of May 1921. We often talk about the Carrington event as the worst-case scenario for solar storms, but we forget the monster that hit us in the 20th century. In May 1921, a massive sunspot 10 times the diameter of Earth rotated into view. Over the course of 3 days, it unleashed a series of CMEs that slammed into Earth's magnetic field with sledgehammer force. The result was the New York Railroad storm, a geomagnetic crisis so intense that it literally set the world on fire. In 1921, the telegraph was the internet of its day. During the storm, voltages on telegraph lines spiked to thousands of volts. Switchboards in New York City burst into flames. In Sweden, a telephone exchange burned to the ground. In telegraph offices across the United States, show operators were terrified as their equipment began to smoke and spark, some receiving electric shocks from their keyboards. Auroras were seen as far south as Texas and Samoa. The night sky turned to blood red, terrifying locals who thought the end of days had arrived. But here is the chilling part. In 1921, our dependence on electricity was in its infancy. We didn't have a global grid. We didn't have satellites. We didn't have microchips sensitive to voltage fluctuations. The damage was limited to burned-out telegraphs and delayed trains. If the 1921 storm were to happen today, it would be the end of the modern era. A study by the Met Office in the United Kingdom and various United States agencies suggests that a storm of that magnitude today would destroy the transformers at the heart of the power grid. It wouldn't just trip the breakers, it would physically melt the copper windings. These transformers take months, sometimes years, to manufacture. Imagine the chaos. No GPS, meaning global shipping halts. No internet, meaning financial markets vanish. No power for months. This event happened just over 100 years ago. It is not ancient history. It is a recurring cycle. The sun does not care about our technology. It threw a punch in 1921 that we shrugged off because we were primitive. Next time, that same punch will shatter our glass jaw. Number 6. Asteroid 4581, Asclepius, 1989. The late 1980s were a time of geopolitical tension, but the real threat wasn't the Soviet Union. It was a rock named Asclepius. On March 22, 1989, a mountain of rock about 1,000 feet wide hurtled through Earth's orbit. It passed through the exact position where Earth had been only 6 hours earlier. Let that sink in. 6 hours. Earth moves at about 67,000 miles per hour around the sun. 6 hours is a blink of an eye. If the asteroid had arrived just slightly differently, it would have impacted the planet. The energy release would have been equivalent to a 600 megaton thermonuclear detonation. For comparison, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated, the Tsar Bomba, was 50 megatons. Asclepius would have been 12 times more powerful if it had hit the Pacific Ocean. The resulting tsunamis would have washed over California, Japan, and Australia, scouring cities from the map. If it had hit land, it would have created a crater miles wide and thrown enough dust into the stratosphere to destroy agriculture for years. The most disturbing detail, we didn't see it coming. Astronomers Henry Hull and Norman Thomas discovered the asteroid on March 31, 1989. That date is important. The asteroid passed us on March 22nd. They found it on March 31st. We only saw the bullet after it had already missed our head. For 9 days, humanity walked around, went to work, and slept in their beds, completely unaware that a world-ending catastrophe had just missed them by a margin of 6 hours. We were like a sleepwalker crossing a highway, oblivious to the semi-truck that just brushed against our pajamas. Number 5. The Cold War solar flare, 1967. We often fear that space will kill us with rocks or radiation, but sometimes space tries to trick us into killing ourselves. May 23, 1967, the height of the Cold War. Tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were at a breaking point. Nuclear bombers were on 24-hour alert, ready to turn the world into ash at a moment's notice. Suddenly, the United States Air Force's ballistic missile early warning system radars in Alaska, Greenland, and the United Kingdom went haywire. They were completely jammed. The screens were filled with static and ghost signals. To the military commanders, this looked like a classic act of war. Jamming enemy radar is the first step before a surprise nuclear first strike. The logic was cold and immediate. The Soviets are blinding us so we won't see the missiles coming. The United States Air Force prepared for war. Aircraft refueled, weapons were prepped. The doomsday clock ticked down to seconds. We were moments away from launching a full-scale nuclear retaliation against an enemy that hadn't actually fired a shot. But just before the order was given, a call came through from NORAD, a newly formed obscure branch of the Air Force. The solar forecasters had detected a massive solar flare erupting from the sun earlier that day. They realized that the radio bursts from the sun were so intense they were overwhelming the radar systems. It wasn't the Soviets, it was the sun. That phone call saved the human race. If those forecasters hadn't connected the dots in time, or if the commanders had been too paranoid to listen, the missiles would have flown. The silos would have opened. Humanity would have incinerated itself in a nuclear holocaust. All because the sun burped, and we mistook it for a weapon. This event remained classified for decades. It is a terrifying example of how the volatility of space can intersect with human paranoia to create the ultimate disaster. Number 4. GRB 2-21909A, the boat. Gamma-ray bursts, or GRBs, are the most powerful explosions in the universe since the Big Bang. They are focused beams of death, usually created when a massive star collapses into a black hole. If a GRB occurred within our galaxy and pointed at Earth, it would strip away our ozone layer in seconds, leaving us to be cooked by cosmic radiation. Okay, we always told ourselves, these things happen far away. But on October 9th, 2022, the universe fired a warning shot right across our bow. Astronomers detected a pulse of high-energy radiation so intense it saturated the detectors on our space telescopes. It was named TORN-22109A, but scientists quickly gave it a nickname, the boat, the brightest of all time. It was 70 times brighter than any gamma-ray burst ever recorded. It originated 2.4 billion light-years away. Yet it was so powerful that it actually ionized Earth's upper atmosphere. Think about that power. An explosion across the visible universe physically altered the chemistry of our air. If that explosion had happened in our own galaxy, say a few thousand light-years away instead of billions, we wouldn't be here discussing it. The beam would have sterilized the planet. The initial flash would be invisible to the naked eye, but the radiation would destroy the DNA of surface life. The secondary effect, the destruction of the ozone layer, would ensure that anything surviving the initial blast would die of cancer or starvation, as crops withered under ultraviolet bombardment. The boat proved that these monsters are real, and they can be far more powerful than our theoretical models predicted. It traveled through the void for 2 billion years, a spear of energy slicing through the dark. We survived only because of distance. But every day, massive stars in our own Milky Way are churning, nearing the end of their lives. We are living in a galaxy that is essentially a minefield, and we are hoping that when the mines go off, the shrapnel flies in the other direction. Number 3. Comet Hikutaki's tail crossing, 1996. In 1996, a Japanese amateur astronomer discovered a comet that would become one of the most spectacular sights of the 20th century, Comet Hakutake. It was beautiful, passing close to Earth and glowing bright in the night sky. But behind the beauty was a hidden horror that scientists only discovered later. The Ulysses spacecraft orbiting the Sun detected something strange. It passed through a region of ionized gas hundreds of millions of miles away from the comet's head. Analysis revealed that this was Hyakutake's tail. The tail of this comet was the longest ever discovered, stretching more than 350 million miles. It was so long, it wrapped halfway around the solar system. And here is the terrifying part, Earth actually flew right through it. We passed through the wake of a massive comet and didn't even know it until the data was analyzed. While the tail itself was just gas and plasma, it highlighted the unpredictable nature of long-period comets. Unlike asteroids, which orbit in the inner solar system and can be tracked, these comets fall in from the Oort cloud, the frozen wasteland at the edge of the solar system. They come in fast on weird orbits, and they are huge. Hyakutake appeared with very little warning. It crossed Earth's orbit just weeks after discovery. If the nucleus of that comet, which was small but traveling at blistering speed, had been on a collision course, we would have had zero chance. No Bruce Willis, no nukes, just impact. The fact that we sailed through its tail is a cosmic reminder of how much debris is out there, invisible until it begins to outgas, by which time it is already at our doorstep. Number 2, the Toba bottleneck solar connection. We tend to think of human history as a steady climb from stone tools to smartphones. But there is a dark chapter in our genetic history that suggests we nearly didn't make it. About 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano in Indonesia erupted. It was an explosion of apocalyptic scale, spewing thousands of cubic kilm of ash into the sky. It triggered a volcanic winter that lasted for years, cooling the planet and destroying food sources. Genetic studies reveal a terrifying scar in our DNA. Around this time, the human population crashed. We went from a thriving species to a ragged group of survivors. Some estimates suggest there were as few as 3,000 to 10,000 reproductive individuals left on the entire planet. We were on the endangered species list. We were one bad winter, one plague, or one drought away from total extinction. But new theories suggest Toba wasn't acting alone. Some paleoclimatologists and astronomers are investigating the links between severe volcanic activity and solar minimums or cosmic ray flux. The theory is that changes in space weather can trigger geological instability on Earth. If the sun enters a deep hibernation, cosmic rays flood the atmosphere, increasing cloud cover and potentially altering the pressure on the crust. Was Toba just bad luck, or was it a synchronized hit from the cosmos? Regardless of the trigger, the Toba bottleneck is the closest humanity has ever come to being wiped out. Every single person you know, every billionaire, every beggar, every genius is a descendant of that tiny tribe that clung to life in the ashes. We are not the chosen ones. We are the leftovers. We survived the filter that killed 9% of our relatives, and we are still living on the same volatile rock orbiting the same variable star, assuming it won't happen again. Number 1, the invisible asteroid 2023 NT1. If you thought we learned our lesson from 2019, think again. The universe loves a sequel. In July 2023, just a couple of years ago, an asteroid named 2023 NT1 flew past Earth. It was about 200 feet wide, large enough to wipe a city like Washington, D.C. off the map and create a crater a mile wide. It passed within 60,000 meters of Earth. That is a quarter of the distance to the moon. And once again, silence. NASA didn't see it. The European Space Agency didn't see it. The amateur asteroid hunters didn't see it. Why? Because it attacked from the sun. It approached us from the direction of our star, blinded by the glare. We only discovered it 2 days after it had already passed us and was heading back out into the dark. This is the number 1 spot because it is the most recent and the most damning proof of our vulnerability. We live in an age of AI, quantum computing, and Mars rovers. We pride ourselves on our surveillance of the sky. Yet a rock capable of killing millions and destabilizing the global economy flew right past our face, and we didn't even flinch. If 2023 NT1 had been on a collision course, there would have been no evacuation. You would be walking down the street, and suddenly the sky would turn white, and you would be vaporized. The news channels wouldn't even have time to type the headline. This is an ancient history. This happened now. It proves that for all our bravado, we are still defenseless against the blind spots of the solar system. We are playing a game of cosmic Russian roulette, and the gun has gone off next to our ear twice in the last 5 years alone. The universe is not hostile. It is indifferent, and that indifference is far more terrifying than any malice. It throws rocks, it vomits plasma, and it explodes stars without a second thought for the biology clinging to this wet rock. We have survived this long not because we are special, but because we are small and the universe has so far missed. But in a game of chance played over billions of years, the house always wins. The question isn't if the next one is coming. The question is, will we see it before it sees us?